proposed legislation before us today. Committee members will come and go during the hearing. We have to introduce bills and other committees and are called away for that reason. It is not an indication that we are not interested in the bill being heard. It's just part of the process. To better facilitate today's proceedings, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. Move to the front row when you're ready to testify. The order of testimony will be as follows: introducer, proponents, opponents, neutral, and then a close. Testifiers, please sign in. Hand your pink sign-in sheet to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. Spell your name for the record before you testify, and be concise. It's my request that you limit your testimony to 3 minutes. Given how packed the room is, we need to be kind of strict on that rule today. If you will not be testifying at the microphone but want to go on the record as having a position on a bill being heard today, there are white tablets at each entrance where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permanent record at the end of today's hearing. Written materials may be distributed to committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution to the committee and staff when you come up to testify. We'll need 10 copies. If you have written testimony but don't have 10 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. To my immediate right is Committee Counsel Joshua Cristalier. To my left at the end of the table is our amazing committee clerk, Natalie Shunk. The committee members with us today will introduce themselves beginning on my far right.
Bo Ballard, District 21.
I'm Senator Mike Jacobson, District 42. I represent Hooker, Thomas, McPherson, Logan, Lincoln, and 3/4 McPherson or Perkins County.
Senator Ray Aguilar, District 35, Grand Island.
Brad Von Gillern, District 4, West Omaha.
Elliot Bostar, District 29.
All right. Also assisting us today are committee pages Quinn and Luke. The committee will take up bills today in the following order: LB 32, LB 145, and then a joint hearing on LB 142 and 779. And with that, we will kick off our hearing on LB 32. Senator Jacobson. Oh, yes. Senator Duncan has just joined us for the record.
Happy to be here.
Happy to have you.
Good morning, Chair Slama, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Mike Jacobson, MikeJacobson. I am before you today to introduce LB 32. In years past, the Nebraska Comprehensive Health Insurance Pool, NECHIP, has been an option for Medicare beneficiaries under age 65 to receive a policy that would pay secondary to Medicare. This program is phasing out, and the plans to close when the last remaining enrollees reach age 65. It has not accepted any new enrollees for quite some time, so it is no longer an option. I have introduced LB 32, which would allow Medicare recipients under the age of 65 who are disabled or have end-stage renal disease, ESRD, to enroll in supplemental Medicare insurance plans within the first 6 months of becoming eligible for Medicare or during the 63-day period following termination of group coverage. The bill also provides a special enrollment period for those already enrolled in Medicare Part B. Such policies would be issued on a guaranteed renewable basis. The rate for such policies could not be more than the weighted average aged premium rate. This weighted average premium rate is based on Missouri's law. In Missouri, a person under age 65 who has been approved for Social Security disability also has the guaranteed right to purchase a Medigap plan when he or she enrolls in Medicare Part B. Missouri has used the weighted average age premium rate since 2009. There have been no changes in the Missouri approach since that time. It is working. 34 states now require Medigap insurers to sell at least one Medigap plan to persons under age 65 with disabilities. 23 of these 34 states require Medigap insurers to make all of their Medigap plans available. Our neighboring states, Colorado, Kansas, and South Dakota, require Medigap insurers to make all of their Medigap plans available for purchase by those with disabilities under age 65. The Kansas statute and South Dakota regulation become effective in became effective in 1999, more than 20 years ago. The Colorado regulation, Kansas statute, and South Dakota regulations are working. There is no evidence that I know of that premiums have risen in states that have implemented Medigap for those under 65 Medicare population. In fact, with respect to those states of Kansas and Missouri, you have been provided with a copy of a Wakely report, Medigap Reform for Medicare enrollees with ESRD under age 65, dated July 22nd, 2022. This report concludes using published reports and observing annual rate changes. We did not observe significant rate increases following legislative changes as compared to national averages in Kansas or Missouri. The Health Management Association HMA report, Medigap Reform for Medicare enrollees with ESRD under age 65, dated February 16, 2022, notes, quote, if all Medigap carriers were required to offer policies to the under 65 population with ESRD and set the premiums at the weighted average charged to all enrollees over the age of 65, we estimate the overall average Medigap premium in Nebraska would increase by 0.3% from $194 per month to $195 per month. For enrollees over the age of 65, the actual premium would continue to vary based upon a variety of factors, although we would expect most plans to include the same average 0.3% increase. It should be pointed out that in Nebraska, the pool of persons under age 65 who may choose to purchase a Medigap plan would basically be those who have worked and have assets, which would be subject to spend down. Many of the disabled or ESRD patients under age 65 are covered by Medicare and would not need to purchase a Medigap plan. Others may have coverage from another source, such as health insurance from a spouse's employment, and would not need to purchase the Medigap plan. In addition, having the option to purchase a Medigap plan would keep people from having to spend down and go to Medicaid, resulting in savings to the taxpayers in Nebraska. Medicare Advantage plans are a Medicare replacement plan, not a Medicare supplement. They are not a good option for disabled and ESRD patients under age 65 in Nebraska, particularly for those living in rural areas. For example, in Columbus Community Hospital website indicates it has not signed a contract with any Medicare Advantage plan. A November 1st, 2022 Community Hospital McCook and McCook Clinic press release notified the public that neither the hospital nor the clinic are in network with any Medicare Advantage products being sold in the area. Community Hospital operates clinics in Curtis, Nebraska, and Trenton, Nebraska. Broadstone Healthcare operates the hospital in Superior, Nebraska. Its website states Broadstone is not a contractor provider for Medicare Advantage or similar cost products. Now is the time for this situation to be rectified in Nebraska. The disabled and ESRD patients under age 65 in Nebraska should have the opportunity to purchase a Medigap plan without the exorbitant premium, just as those 65 and older do. The disabled and ESRD patients under 65 do not choose to have their disabilities or ESRD. When approved for a Social Security disability, they are forced to go to Medicare. This is a matter of justice, equity, and fairness. Disabled and ESRD patients under age 65 in Nebraska should not be forced to move to other states to purchase the Medigap plan or have their assets subject to spend down if they choose to remain in Nebraska. In addition, the current situation will certainly discourage the disabled and ESRD patients in other states from moving to Nebraska. This is the message. Is this the message we want to send? And with that, I'll stop and ask for any questions. I would also tell you that there are, as you can see, many testifiers behind me who have significant knowledge and expertise in the subject matter. So I refer any specific questions about the bill to them, but I'd be happy to entertain any questions now.
Thank you very much, Senator Jacobson. Are there any questions from the committee? See none. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open it up to proponent testimony for LB 32. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Stephen W.K., STEPHEN-WKAY. My wife Jean planned on testifying in support of LB 32 this morning. However, she is ill and not able to attend the hearing. Her ADA accommodation written testimony has been submitted through the legislature's online portal. I am testifying in support of LB 32. On a personal note, I practiced law in North Platte, Nebraska for 40 years. In 2018, at age 64, I had to find a job with health insurance because my wife was faced with the resulting disability of multiple sclerosis. I applied at Walmart and Menards since health insurance benefits would have been offered. However, I did not receive interviews. I was able to secure a job in Fargo, North Dakota, which resulted in the closing of my business and moving to Fargo. It was difficult having to tell clients and friends on short notice I was moving. The drive from North Platte to Fargo was 10 to 12 hours. Weekend trips home were not possible. If Medigap plans would have been available for purchase in Nebraska by those with disabilities under age 65, I would have been able to continue practicing law in North Platte and assisting my wife. It was hard leaving home on the morning of October 10, 2018. Under age 65 Nebraskans found to be disabled by the Social Security Administration receive Medicare benefits. They do not choose to become disabled and should not be discriminated against as a result. All Medigap insurers doing business in Nebraska should give those with disabilities under age 65 the same opportunity to purchase Medigap plans as those 65 and older. This is an issue of justice, equity, and fairness. Colorado, Kansas, and South Dakota took care of this inequity years ago. It is time for Nebraska to do the same. Thank you, and please vote yes to advance LB 32 to general file. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. K. Are there any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you
much
very
for being
much.
here. Additional proponent testimony for LB 32.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Committee. My name is Hrant Jamgoshan. I'll spell that for all of you. That's spelled H-R-A-N-T. Last name Jamgoshan. I serve as the CEO for Dialysis Patient Citizens. Submitted testimony, but just want to highlight a couple of key points on why this is so important to our members in the state. One, for financial stability. Medicare covers 80% of the cost of care. There's still 20% that patients have to come up with out of pocket. There are over 2,100 residents under the age of 65 in Nebraska who are on dialysis, and there are actually about 600 of those who are not eligible, dual eligible, and do not have access to Medigap. And as I mentioned, not just the financial stability, but also the critical part that it could be actually life-saving for some of these individuals. There are 137 who are currently on the transplant list, and without secondary insurance or significant financial resources, oftentimes those individuals are moved from active to inactive. And while some do well on dialysis, not everyone does. And I just want to make a couple real quick points. Thank you, Senator Jacobson, for leading this effort. One of the things that it's a misnomer is that legislation like this is potentially challenging, insurers. On the contrary, we've seen where there isn't this kind of legislation in place. For example, in Rhode Island, some insurers have tried to cover disabled or dialysis patients. And in fact, last year when we were testifying on this issue, one of the committee members said this is why he ran for office. His wife was on one of those plans, that because that was the only plan in the state, that insurance actually had to discontinue the plan. And so his wife was actually forced off of the transplant list until legislation was introduced that would allow for, basically the sharing of these costs. Secondly, one of the things that I think is really striking is the fact that this language includes Missouri compromise kind of language. In other words, it's not, requiring community rating. It's not requiring that the premiums be the same for 65 and everyone under. It's a compromise language that acknowledges that it's going to be a little more expensive for individuals who are on disability or who have dialysis. But at the same time, Missouri's done quite well. This past year, they had 37 insurers that offered 245 plans. If it wasn't, an effective way to address these issues, then plans wouldn't be offered. And so, I just want to thank you for your time, your consideration of this issue. And thanks, Senator Jacobson, for his leadership.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
Are there
any
any
questions?
questions from the committee? See none, thank you for your expertise. All right. Good morning.
Good morning. Chairperson Senator Slama and committee members. My name is Wendy Schrag, and that's SCHRAG. And I'm here representing Fresenius Medical Care. We're a dialysis company nationwide, and we have 9 clinics in Nebraska. We serve 623 Nebraskans with kidney failure or end-stage renal disease, ESRD. And most of these patients come to our clinics 3 times a week. And we're in the following communities: Omaha, Kearney, Grand Island, and North Platte. Under federal law, people who have ESRD can qualify for Medicare regardless of age, as long as they have work history requirements. And most people over age 65 have secondary insurance to help with these costs. However, those with ESRD or other disabilities, like we'll hear today, under the age of 65 are often unable to access critical medical services such as kidney transplant unless they have comprehensive health insurance. The Nebraska risk pool was mentioned by Senator Jacobson. A year ago, when we had a bill similar to this, I contacted the pool and verified that there are just a handful of people left in it. And as soon as those people age to 65, they're going to close the pool completely. And they haven't accepted new enrollees for a few years now. So that pool is just no longer an option for our patients. However, in 2021, there was federal legislation through the 21st Century Cures Act that mandated that Medicare Advantage plans could no longer turn down people with ESRD. So we were excited about MA plans. We thought that those would be an option, especially in states like Nebraska that don't have a Medigap available for under 65. However, the MA plans have some barriers, and we've heard from our patients the following things. Although we have patients who have signed up for MA plans, they can continue to be concerned about personal copay amounts. Some MA plans only cover dialysis at 80%, so that leaves a 20% copay. And in fact, most of the plans that our patients have in Nebraska follow that model. I checked with our billing department to see what the average amount of out-of-pocket for a patient in Nebraska with an MA plan is. It's $965 a month before they meet their out-of-pocket expense, which is often $6,000 to $7,000 a year. So then they may be covered 100% for a few months of the year, but then the next year that starts all over again. Some patients also told us that they wanted to stay on original Medicare because they felt that their Part D plan was a better medication option than the medication coverage in an MA plan. Others had issues with in-network, out-of-network, or just didn't have an MA plan available. I live in Kansas, and I've worked in dialysis for over 30 years. We've always had plans for under 65 in Kansas. They've worked well. And we would really like Nebraska to consider this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strog. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Additional proponent testimony.
Hello, my name is Edison McDonald, Edison McDonald. I'm here representing the ARC of Nebraska. We're Nebraska's largest organization representing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We support LB 32 because many of our members have struggled with access to proper health care and the holes between Medicaid and Medicare. LB 32 helps families who fall into some of these gaps or struggle with a cliff effect impact. This is an issue that we regularly have calls on from families As families struggle to navigate the complexities between Medicaid and Medicare, there are numerous gaps. This is a smart, strategic tool that can help to eliminate some of those gaps. Many states have already addressed this, including Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, South Dakota, Oklahoma, and Texas. And other states such as Arizona, Kentucky, and Rhode Island are looking at this. I wanted to go and read a part of some comments from Shauna Dahlgren from Nebraska Easter Seals that I think really kind of digs into this issue well. Individuals with disabilities may experience high medical expenses, so out-of-pocket expenses can be much more than affordable. As an alternative to original Medicare, Medicare Advantage offers another coverage option, acknowledging that improvements to Medicare Advantage plans and availability in recent years, a number of issues or challenges remain. One, the lack of Medicare Advantage options for certain counties. Two, difficulties of understanding the coverage and steps needed to avoid out-of-network charges. Three, the lack of providers within a reasonable distance. 4, providers changing acceptance of plans from one visit to the next. 5, out-of-pocket maximums, not including all out-of-pocket expenses, therefore costing much more than the individual sometimes expects. And 6, sometimes an individual chooses a Medicare Advantage plan based on drug coverage or sometimes for provider coverage, but not both. So one plan may not fit an individual's need, where original Medicare with a drug plan and a Medigap plan may offer much better coverage and access to providers and medical services. With that, just want to urge you to support LB 32, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Cal.
About how many people with developmental disabilities would need this?
That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Gina Ragland, JINA-RAGLAND, here today testifying on behalf of ARP Nebraska in support of LB 32. ARP Nebraska is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works across Nebraska to strengthen communities and advocates for the issues that matter most to families and those 50 and older. Medicare supplement insurance is a form of supplemental insurance that helps pay for gaps in Medicare payment. Given the high costs of healthcare and Medicare cost sharing, Medigap policies are key to affording care for people in traditional Medicare, eliminating the cumbersome 20% copay for services generally every time they seek medical attention or services. Unfortunately, younger beneficiaries with disabilities face significant obstacles to purchasing these policies. These hurdles in Nebraska come in the form of denying access to supplemental insurance coverage if the beneficiary is under the age of 65 on Medicare due to a disability. It's the policy of ARP that Congress and state legislatures should keep Medicare supplemental insurance, also known as Medigap, policies affordable and available to those who need it. One of those being by requiring Medicare supplemental insurance to provide Medicare beneficiaries with disabilities under age 65 that same guaranteed issue of access to supplemental coverage given to those that are age 65 and older. In Nebraska, concerns remain that we are not providing that access to those individuals. People who aren't yet 65 can enroll in Medicare if they're disabled and they've been receiving disability benefits for at least 2 years. As with end-stage renal disease or ESRD, or if your disability happens to be ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, you do not have to wait 24 months for Medicare coverage. You can require Medicare as soon as you become entitled to Social Security disability insurance. Federal legislation was enacted in late 2020 that ended the waiting period, allowing ALS patients to get Social Security disability insurance and Medicare immediately after diagnosis. More than 367,000 residents are enrolled in Medicare in Nebraska. And as of January 2023, 48 insurers offered Medigap plans in Nebraska. And about 182,000 people are on Medicare with a Medigap plan. And Senator Cal, to answer your question, roughly 11% of those beneficiaries are under 65. I don't have the exact number, but it's a percentage of about 11%. 34 states now have the same guaranteed issue requirements for Medigap. And again, in Indiana, Tammy's Law became law in July 2020, and most recently was enacted in Virginia in 2021 to ensure that Medicare gap plans for disabled enrollees for under age 65 were put into play. Individuals who are under age 65 who qualify for traditional Medicare due to their disability that have ESRD or ALS are among those with the greatest healthcare needs. They're greatly in need of affordable Medigap policies to supplement Medicare cost sharing. The other note I want to make in closing is those who obtain Medicare often have, or those under 65 have high medical bills and medical costs, and those are reported to be the most common reasons for bankruptcies. 66.5% of bankruptcies are caused directly by medical expenses, making it the leading cause for bankruptcy. ARP supports LB 32. Thanks, Senator Jacobson, and thanks the committee for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ragland. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. And just so everyone knows, this is not my legal counsel's phone just going off. We've got the light system. We found it's also helpful to supplement with a bit of an alarm once you get to 3 minutes and 15 seconds, just to wrap things up so that we can make sure everybody who came here to be heard today can. So, all right, good morning.
Good morning, Chair Slama and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Leslie Spry, L-E-S-L-I-E, Spry, S-P-R-Y. I am testifying in support of LB 32 on behalf of the Nebraska Medical Association. I'm a kidney guy in here on behalf of the Nebraska Medical Association, and I previously served as the member of the Nebraska State Board of Health, and as well as a past president of the Nebraska Medical Association. The Nebraska Medical Association supports LB 32, which would make Medicare supplemental policies accessible and affordable to individuals under 65 who are eligible for Medicare because of disability or end-stage renal disease. Without a supplemental policy, Medicare beneficiaries with end-stage renal disease must figure out a way to pay 20% of medical costs not covered by Medicare. For patients needing dialysis multiple times per week, this can amount to as much as $20,000 or more per year. Additionally, Medicare alone is not considered full coverage by transplant centers, meaning that without supplemental insurance, these individuals cannot be added to the transplant waiting list. The most difficult problem is watching these young dialysis patients not be able to get on the transplant list. Getting a kidney transplant will double their life expectancy as compared to staying on dialysis. I have seen patients start GoFundMe pages in order to obtain comprehensive coverage in order to get on that transplant list. I have reviewed patients in our not-for-profit dialysis unit, and 6% of our patients out of a total population of 307 are under the age of 65 and having difficulty obtaining supplemental coverage. Half of those individuals are unable to get any supplemental coverage and ultimately must rely on charity care, the Nebraska Chronic Renal Disease Program, which only pays a small portion of that and also has income limits, or exhaust their resources until they qualify for Medicare or Medicaid. Over the years, I have seen multiple patients who fall in this gap and end up in bankruptcy. While medical costs for these folks are substantial, the numbers of them are small compared to the overall 65 and over Medicare population in Nebraska. While my experience is primarily with renal disease, the Nebraska Medical Association also supports extending coverage to those who qualify for Medicare because of disability, which can be equally devastating to patients' finances. The majority of states, including our neighbors in Kansas, South Dakota, Colorado, Missouri, have already taken action to make affordable supplemental coverage available for Medicare patients under the age of 65. Nebraska should do the same for these critically ill and disabled patients. Giving these individuals the ability to purchase supplemental policies will allow them to focus on their health rather than the enormous stress of figuring out how to deal with the financial burden of their condition and ultimately keep additional patients off the Medicaid rolls. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spry. We appreciate your testimony. Is there any questions from the committee? So I have one. In your experience, what is the cost of replacing that kidney versus a lifetime on dialysis?
So the first year costs for kidney transplant are usually around 100 to 120,000. And then after that, even Medicare has shown that the cost benefits accrue over time. So the first year, Average cost for dialysis patients per year is about 80,000. So yeah, you end up spending some more money the first year, but after that, costs go down substantially. And so if that kidney lasts 2 years, you're in the plus.
There we go. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Dean Large, Dean Large. I live in Southwest Nebraska, and I am one of those people that's affected by that Medicare gap for people under 65. When a person needs the access to Medicare prior to 65, their life has already been turned upside down. The last thing they need is problems with insurance. I went on Medicare on December 1st, 2022, but I will turn 65 on September the 10th in 2023. So I'm 64 years old. I have failed kidneys. I'm on home peritoneal dialysis and have been since October of 2021. In December of 2022, I took out a Blue Cross Blue Shield Medicare Advantage to try to fill that gap. However, my kidney dialysis provider is not contracted, and I still have a gap. Here in Southwest Nebraska, there was only one insurance company that even provided anything. I got Blue Cross and Blue Shield as a Band-Aid to get me through till September. I have been on the policy for 2 months and still have no idea if I'm exposed to any large bills or not because of my dialysis contractor, my dialysis provider not being contracted. The state of Nebraska and the unicameral needs to take a very serious look at the gap in the Medicare coverage for people that's under 65. I want to encourage the support of LB 32, and also for your information, I am trying to get on a kidney transplant list. And I've been trying for the last 2 years, and insurance is one of the big hurdles that you got to deal with.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Large.
Any
We appreciate it. Any questions from the committee? Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate you sharing your personal story. I think that's incredibly important. One of the things we've heard a lot about here today is the transplant list and the hurdles that go into that. For those of us who have not had to deal with that incredibly difficult process, can you explain a little bit more as to what hoops you do have to jump through to get on that list? I know it's a lot.
Are you sure you're going to really hear my story?
And I know we're trying to get a lot of folks in today,
Well,
but I think it's important to hear about that.
I started down the transplant list, and I'll be flat out blunt and honest, in July 2 years ago. And my wife was fighting cancer, and I was being healed from bypass, and my health wasn't good and whatever else. So it just took a little longer, and I tried University of Nebraska at Omaha is where I was at. The first thing I ran into is a COVID mandate vaccination program. So that has been a hurdle that I have not wanted to deal with. So therefore I have to look out of state. And at that time it was Tulsa, Oklahoma, and found out later on that it was Sioux Falls, South Dakota was an option. And here in the last 2 months, after 15 months of fighting and whatever else, I found a place in Denver. And of course, the legal side or the insurance side is a big thing. But I have polycystic kidney is what basically caused, it's a genetic trait and it runs in the family. And I am trying to find a donor to help me move up because the only viable hospital right now that I can drive to without a donor has got a 5-year waiting list. I'm not going to make it without having a donor to go with me or somebody to help me out, or policy changes at the University in Omaha, policy changes. And or because when you turn around and start trying to go to like Sioux Falls, South Dakota, whatever else, are you willing to move there for 2 years to get on their list?
Thank you. I appreciate going into a little more detail about that. I think it's important for people to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator Duncan. Additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Large.
Hello,
morning.
good morning. My name's Anna Zielinski, ANNAZELINSKE, and I submitted my testimony online, so I'm just going to share some highlights. I'm here representing the Amyotrophic Lateral Sclerosis Association, or ALS Association, and the people of Nebraska who are living with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. So for those of you who don't know about ALS, ALS is an always fatal neurodegenerative disease that affects the way the brain communicates with the muscles. And slowly over time, usually within 2 to 5 years, the message is going to the hands, to where we're able to use our hands, or our feet, where we're able to walk, eventually to our ability to swallow and eat, and then also to breathe. Once the messages die that go to the diaphragm, then the lungs no longer work and the person passes away. Typically, this is within 2 to 5 years, as I mentioned. And there's no diagnostic test for ALS. So if a person is dealing with weak hands or weak feet, there's a lot of ruling out. And so a person who has a very laborious job may end up being out of work for quite a while before they have an answer of what is causing the disease. And this is a reason why people with ALS are eligible for SSDI benefits and therefore Medicare before other diseases. And so while relief comes after the end of this search for what's causing the person's diagnosis, it obviously is short-lived, because the answer is the person will continue to lose function and will pass away from this disease. I understand this probably evokes some sadness or potentially even pity for people going through this, but I've worked in disability world for more than 20 years, and I've learned people with disabilities don't want our pity. They don't want to be made to felt sorry for. People living with disabilities in Nebraska don't need people feeling sorry for them. What they need is access to services and insurance and ability to be able to live well with their disease, and with ALS to actually die well and not leave their young families often in peril or like bankruptcy. So another just reality is that any one of us here in this room are really one diagnosis, one accident, one wrong place, one wrong time, place away from dealing with these very real issues. So I respectfully ask for your support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zielinski. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Additional proponent testimony for LB 32. Do we have any, Mr. Bell, are you opponent?
I have no.
Okay, last call for proponent testimony. Seeing none, we'll move to opposition testimony for LB 32. Good morning, Mr. Bell.
Good morning, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Robert M. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I am the Executive Director and Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation, appearing today in opposition to LB 32. As you know, the Nebraska Insurance Federation is a state trade association of Nebraska insurance companies. Many of the Federation members companies are active in the Medicare supplement insurance marketplace and have policyholders who would be impacted by the passage of LB 32, which would mandate that issuers of Medicare supplement insurance offer such policies to individuals who are under 65 years of age and who are eligible for Medicare by reason of disability. Medicare supplement policies, commonly referred to as Medigap policies, are plans sold by private insurers to provide coverage for some of the costs original Medicare does not cover. According to information from America's Health Insurance Plans, or AHIP, over 182,000 Nebraskans had Medigap policies in 2020. These plans provide important financial protections to Nebraskans 65 years of age or over. The members of the Federation who sell these important products are concerned that LB 32 will lead to increased premiums for Nebraskan seniors, leading to disruption and dislocation of the marketplace. The Medicare Payment Advisory Commission, MedPAC, is an independent congressional agency established by law to advise Congress on issues affecting the Medicare program. According to MedPAC, a MedPAC report, beneficiaries younger than 65 account for a disproportionate share of Medicare spending, as do individuals with end-stage renal disease or ESRD. And that's the handout I gave to you from that report from this summer. I would highlight that the ESRD population has, on average, 6 times higher costs than the average senior population. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, over 1,000 Nebraskans under 65 are eligible for Medicare because of ESRD, which would add, with some back of the envelope math based off of what Dr. Spry said, approximately $80 million of costs to the Medigap population, or over $400 a year for a senior enrollee in premium. We are sympathetic, of course. I'm going to shorten my testimony, I guess. So sorry about that. We are sympathetic to the difficulties for individuals under 65 and the ESRD population. As you've already heard, Medicare Advantage is an option and has recently become an option for these individuals. Medicare Advantage is very similar to insurance that's provided by employers. It's managed care. So the insurance that I have through my wife's employment is a managed care type of policy where I can only see certain doctors, or I have to get prior authorization and all of those other matters that go along with it. I would just 2 additional points, if I may, Madam Chairwoman.
Very briefly.
Yes. There are a small number of Medigap policies that are offered to individuals under 65 already, but of course they would be subject to underwriting. And you've already heard about other states, so I'll leave that be. So, and Senator Jacobson and I have spoken about these differences between Nebraska and other states. With that, Federation is opposed to the passage of LB 32. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Von Gilleren.
Mr. Bell, I was jotting down a few numbers as you went.
Yeah, sorry.
I
Yeah,
wanna
let's
make
go
sure I
going
got them
fast.
correctly. I think you said there's 182,000 existing policies in Nebraska.
Medigap policies.
Medigap policies.
So Nebraska is a very heavy Medigap state. So compared to, say, Missouri, which was mentioned, if you took the same rate of Medigap policies in Nebraska, that we would expect to see about double the number of Medigap policies that would be in Missouri. So Missouri has about half of what we would have by rate. So we have a very healthy Medigap market for seniors in our state.
And back to your back of the envelope math,
Yeah.
is it those 182,000 policies that would potentially increase by approximately $400?
Yeah. And again, this is just, I mean, there's a lot of caveats on that.
I know, I'm not nailing you down.
Yeah.
on-
Yeah. So
on
you
cost.
should take, if you take $80 million divided by 182,000, that's $430 a year.
Okay.
So.
And what are those premiums annually? What does that $400 represent as a percentage increase? What would those premiums?
That I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend greatly. I mean, and again, this is pretty bad
5%
math.
increase, 50% increase?
That I don't know.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bell.
You're welcome.
All right, additional opponents. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Jeremiah Blakey, Jeremiah, B as in boy, Lake. I'm the Government Affairs Associate and Registered Lobbyist for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska, and I'm testifying in opposition to LB 32. In order to not be repetitive with Mr. Bell, I'm going to skip over this a little bit, but as you know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska offers Medicare supplement policies to cover the costs that Medicare does not, including deductibles, copays, and coinsurance. We offer 7 standardized plans in Nebraska, and premiums are based on the individual's age and other health indicators. LB 32 would require insurers like Blue Cross to make Medicare supplement plans available to individuals who are under the age of 65 and who are eligible for Medicare. The bill also limits our ability to rate and price plans for this new population, resulting in higher premiums for other members. And as Mr. Bell referenced, there's the report from MedPAC that found that this population is more expensive to cover, although we don't offer plans in other states or have experience in Missouri or Kansas or other states. We can't quantify what that impact would be, but reasonably we can assume that because of the additional costs, it would increase rates for our members. Again, with that said, we're more than happy to sit down with Senator Jacobson and the committee and try to work something out that's workable for the needs we've heard here today and something that's unique to Nebraska. So with that, I'll close and answer any questions you have.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, additional opponent testimony to LB 32. Good morning.
Thank you, committee members. My name's Tom Gilsdorf, Gilsdorf, and I'm with Medica Insurance Company, non-profit insurance company based in Minnetonka, Minnesota. We're in 12 states, and in Nebraska, we offer individual health, group health insurance, Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplement, and Medicare cost plans. And I won't repeat some of the information from the previous testifiers, but I am testifying in opposition to Legislative Bill 32. 180,000 individuals on Medicare supplement plans in the state of Nebraska. That's half the state's Medicare population. And it is a popular option in part because it is still an affordable option for seniors. A lot of whom are on fixed incomes, don't have the ability to, increase what they can pay. MedSup premiums do go up based on the risk pool that's insured by that insurance company. It is a vibrant market. There's dozens of carriers in this market, and it's again, a very popular option. So there was a 2018 study by the University of California. I think the doctor that previously testified, it's consistent. There's about 1% of the Medicare population across the country has ESRD. That represents 7% of Medicare's costs. And the average cost of a dialysis patient to the Medicare program is $90,000. So again, affordability is a concern for half of the state's population. In this conversation would be different if we were having it 3 to 6 years ago. So I want to talk a little bit about Medicare Advantage. Is it a perfect option? No, I don't know that it's a perfect option for everyone. But in this state, Medicare Advantage is available in 86 of the 93 counties. And 95% of the state's Medicare population has access to a Medicare Advantage plan. There might be one in the county, or in the more metro areas, there's several. It's guarantee issue. Medicare has provided a support structure with risk adjustment payments to help with the financial viability of those programs. A lot of those programs have travel benefits to the doctor, to the pharmacy, meal programs, all things that are not available with the Medigap market. And as Medigap premiums increase, you look at the premium of an average Medicare Advantage PPO plan. It might be $0, $50, $75. There was a question on MedSup premiums. Average out of pocket for a Medicare Advantage PPO, maybe $4,000 to $6,000. If that's out of network, it's going to be higher. But when you start to look at Medigap premiums that get to $250, $350, $450 a month, you start to get to $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 to $6,000 in out-of-pocket costs in premiums. So again, I just want to make this committee maybe just a minute here.
No, less than a minute.
Okay, aware of the options. I think we have options here with education through our SHIP program on what is available, as well as with this bill, the opportunity to look at appropriately putting the rates where they need to and plan availability. I think some things that maybe have worked in other states, but again, I think education to the population is key.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Gilsdorf. Are there any questions from the committee? See none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, additional opponent testimony to LB 32. See none, is there anybody wishing to testify in the neutral position on LB 32? See none, Senator Jacobson, you're welcome to close. And as you approach, we have letters for the record, 12 proponents and 1 opponent.
Thank you, Chairperson Slama and members of the committee. I want to close by really speaking to you more about the reality of the need for this bill. What we've heard today in testimony is that other states are doing it. I don't know why Nebraska cannot. I refuse to believe that Nebraska cannot. I would also tell you that we've heard about premiums, but all we've heard is wild estimates. We've not heard any hard numbers, and this bill's been hanging out there to be studied. We have a good idea of what's happening in other states in terms of premium costs. It's easy to go ahead and scare people with premiums to be able to keep from doing the right thing. I live in western Nebraska. I live west central Nebraska. I'm in District 42. I can tell you I'm painfully aware of the problems we're having with providers. If you look across western Nebraska and across the 3rd Congressional District, many community hospitals lost money last year. It's becoming more and more challenging to keep those hospitals open. Providers under various plans are becoming more and more limited. But we've learned in McCook, we saw what the problems are with no providers on Medicare Advantage. Don't get me started on Medicare Advantage. I've got a long list of problems with Medicare Advantage. It's a replacement to Medicare, not a supplement. This is a bill that I believe needs to be done. It's probably 2 or 3 years late. Put yourself in the position that you've worked your entire life, you and your spouse. You're about to retire, a few years away from retirement. You're going to travel. You're going to enjoy retirement. And suddenly you're dealing first with the impact of a disability by your spouse. And then you're faced with the idea that you're going to spend down all the money that you've saved for retirement to cover the needs that this plan would cover. I don't think that's right for Nebraska. I think we have a choice today to ask ourselves, is it Nebraska the good life, or is Nebraska not for everyone? I think it's the prior. I think we can do better. And I hope you'll forward and vote favorably on LB 32. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Jacobson. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, this brings to a close our hearing on LB 32. We'll now move into LB 145. Senator Bostar.
I feel like I need that.
All right. Senator Bostar, welcome to your committee.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Slama and fellow members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. For the record, my name is Elliot Bostar. That's ELIOTBOSTAR, and I represent Legislative District 29. I'm here to introduce LB 145, legislation to provide affordable access to coverage of mammography as well as other forms of diagnostic imaging during breast health examinations to better protect Nebraska women from breast cancer. And for the record, I will be speaking about the white copy amendment that was just distributed and not the green copy bill. 45% of American women report struggling to access preventative care, costs being cited as a leading barrier to care access according to an Ipsos poll released on January 31st, 2023 on behalf of the Alliance for Women's Health and Prevention. 25% of women surveyed said they could not afford to access health care, underscoring the role that high healthcare costs are playing in patient engagement and well-being. Preventative care like well visits and screenings reduce the risk for disease and help support healthy lives. LB 145 will remove barriers to care and bring breast cancer screenings within reach of many more Nebraska women. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, approximately 40% of women have breast tissue that is considered dense. Women with dense tissue have a higher chance of developing breast cancer. The more dense the tissue, the higher the cancer risk. Generally, glandular and fibrous tissue is more dense than fatty tissue and is more likely to develop cancer. Dense tissue can also hide cancer because tumors in dense tissue appear similar on a mammogram. Mammograms provide a lower level of sensitivity than other types of diagnostic imaging, and this reduced sensitivity can lead physicians and experts to miss small tumors in the screening process, putting women with dense tissue at a greater risk of complications and death. Other forms of diagnostic imaging, such as ultrasound or magnetic resonance imaging, can provide healthcare practitioners with better information earlier, as these forms of imaging are better at detecting the presence of tumors in dense tissue. This legislation allows women with dense tissue to access screening methods that can more easily detect small tumors and cancer still in early stages, thereby giving them a better chance to defeat the disease and live healthy lives. The CDC also notes that a woman's risk for breast cancer is higher if she has a mother, sister, or daughter, a first-degree relative, or multiple family members on either her mother's or father's side of the family who have had breast or ovarian cancer. Family history, as well as certain specific genetic mutations, can place some women at a significantly increased risk for breast cancer. LB 145 stipulates that health insurance plans that cover mammography must also provide coverage for other forms of diagnostic imaging when medically appropriate. This legislation states that any woman who is under 40 years of age is entitled to at least one mammogram each year, and additional mammograms if determined necessary by their healthcare provider if they are determined to be at an increased risk of breast cancer due to a family or personal history of breast cancer or prior atypical breast biopsy, positive testing for a concerning genetic mutation, or dense tissue based on breast imaging. LB 145 goes on to specify that any woman who, based on the National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines for breast cancer screening and diagnosis and the recommendation of the patient's healthcare provider, has an increased risk for breast cancer due to a family or personal history of breast cancer or prior atypical breast biopsy, positive testing for a concerning genetic mutation, or dense breast tissue based on breast imaging, is entitled to one digital breast tomosynthesis or 3D mammogram and one bilateral whole breast ultrasound each year. And finally, any woman who, based on the National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines for breast cancer screening and diagnosis and the recommendation of the patient's healthcare provider, has an increased risk for breast cancer due to a family or personal history of breast cancer or prior atypical breast biopsy, positive testing for a concerning genetic mutation, or a history of chest radiation, which can increase cancer risk, is entitled to one diagnostic magnetic resonance imaging each year. According to the American Cancer Society, breast cancer is the second most deadly cancer affecting women. Furthermore, a 2021 clinical review from the American Society of Clinical Oncology Journal finds that the incidence of invasive breast cancer has increased among adolescent and young adult women since 2004, and breast cancer among this population is frequently hereditary. This population of younger women are also more likely than older women to present with aggressive subtypes, advanced disease, and increased mortality risk. The earlier the detection, the better chance of healthcare professionals have of both treating and curing breast cancer for women of all ages. LB 145 better equips our physicians and healthcare providers with the tools and resources they need to keep women in Nebraska healthy. Thank you for your time. I would encourage your support of LB 145, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Capps.
Senator Bostar, what's the current mandate for care? What do people get now and at what ages?
So under the ACA, I have this. It's actually in the white copy as well, just because it's carried over text. I believe it's over 40 years of age.
Okay.
You're entitled to
Every year?
a mammogram every year.
Every other year?
Every year. Possibly. There are definitely people behind me that will know the specifics of that. And then I think there are circumstances where that changes depending on your personal medical factors.
So this is just looking to reset it, if it's at 40, to reset it to 35 and still allow the.
So this bill would, if you're under 40, if you have one of multiple risk factors, you would be entitled to at least one mammogram a year.
So if you're like 20 or 25, so it's no age limit. It's just those risk factors make it.
Yes. And then depending on other risk factors, you could be entitled to at any age, for example, an ultrasound.
Just a further diagnostic tool based on your personal medical.
And then a whole separate set of risk factors could under this legislation entitle you to an MRI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Additional questions from the committee? Just a quick follow-up, judging from the white copy, page 1, line 26, we're taking that from 50 to 40, that age limit. Okay. I see nodding heads in the audience.
Yes.
That is good enough for the record. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Senator Bostar.
Thank you.
We'll now open it up for proponent testimony for LB 145. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Slama. I'm Mary Jane Glade, MaryJaneGlade. I'm a doctor of nursing practice, certified family nurse practitioner. I actually went back and got my doctorate in 2019 from Creighton and did my dissertation and my scholarly project on this very matter. So I have my lovely 60-page, presentation if anybody ever wants to read it. But about 8 years ago, I was working at a gynecology and fertility clinic here in Lincoln, Nebraska, a very large women's health practice. And I started a screening program there for women based on their risk factors and identification of if they needed more screening based on their personal risk factors. So I called it a cancer risk assessment, and I looked at their family history, their personal history, and I would individualize a screening plan that was appropriate for them based on their risk. I identified many women that needed additional screening at different ages, whether it be mammography before age 40, MRI of the breast, whole breast ultrasound. And when we added these additional screenings, we found very early stage cancers, precancerous lesions, and I have it all that the data shows and supports that if we identify these women and provide additional supplemental screenings, we're going to reduce cancer in Nebraska. I would be amiss to say that, I bet everybody in this room has been affected by somebody or knows somebody or been affected by cancer, and maybe not just breast cancer. What would you have done if you could have prevented that patient from getting that cancer, that family member, or preventing them from getting chemotherapy or radiation or finding their cancer at a very early stage? I'm sitting here today as a high-risk individual, but also as a provider who truly cares about my patients and identifying the risk factors to provide supplemental screenings that could change their lives, in Nebraska. And not a lot of states have legislature like this, but there are many states who provide supplemental breast ultrasound for those women with dense breast tissue. I think a lot of us have heard about Katie Couric. Her cancer was not identified on her mammogram. She was getting an automatic breast ultrasound every year, which identified her cancer. I'm sitting here for a patient who wasn't able to come today, diagnosed at 35. She was identified as high risk at 30. She was getting an MRI and a mammogram at age 30. And because of the cost of her insurance not covering it as a covered preventative service, she did not get her MRI 2 years ago. She now was diagnosed with a 5-centimeter breast mass in her lymph node. She has a 4 and a 2-year-old. She's going through chemotherapy. She is kicking herself because if she would have had the ability to have that MRI done 2 years ago, her story would be much different. And, we hope she survives it, but breast cancer is a leading cause of cancer deaths in Nebraska. And 15% of those diagnosed this year have an elevated risk that should be identified. So thank you very much. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Glade. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your expertise in the area, and I know we have a lot of testifiers. But one of the things I wanted maybe to have you expand upon just a little bit, this may sound dumb, but obviously catching the cancer earlier or catching the possibility earlier can make it easier to provide that care or prevention. How does that exactly work? Catching it earlier, what are the things that you can do that can then lead to prevention and or preliminary care that can reduce the need for the more expensive care down the road?
Absolutely. So I sit down with every patient. I go through their risk factors, their family history, might incorporate genetic testing. So if they're identified to have a genetic predisposition to cancer, such as a BRCA1 mutation, which is probably the most well-known, and we have speakers to speak on this, we identify screening methods for them, which might include a breast MRI start at age 25. because their risk of developing breast cancer is 87% in their life. So if we had an MRI in addition to a mammogram, we're able to catch cancers that are less than a centimeter, more likely to be node negative. So less need for chemotherapy, radiation, which are extremely high cost in cancer care, and for preventative surgery some of the time to reduce their breast cancer risk to less than 5%.
And I think you kind of answered my follow-up question with that. But just to clarify for the record, if we catch these things earlier, do you believe in your professional experience that's going to lead to reduced costs moving forward?
Absolutely, 100%. And we can show, I mean, the data shows that. I have it here. We have publications that the cost of a cancer treatment, if you're doing chemotherapy, radiation, is probably about $200,000 a year now. If we catch an atypical lesion on an MRI, we do an excisional biopsy, we take it out, we put them on a medication, and they go on their life.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Clay.
All right, thank you very much.
Proponents, and I would ask those wishing to be proponents on this bill, just start moving forward to some of these front couple of rows, just to lower turnaround time and to make sure that you can get heard. All right, good morning.
Hi, my name is Brandy Preston, B-R-A-N-D-I, Preston, P-R-E-S-T-O-N. And thank you all for your time. If you had an 87% chance of getting in a car accident today, but you had no choice but to get behind the wheel, I'm sure you would all do something a little differently. You probably wouldn't have your children in the car. You would likely wear your seatbelt. You would drive the speed limit. You might even slow down for that yellow light instead of racing through it. These precautions are similar to the screening protocols recommended for our high-risk women. The difference? Car insurance companies give discounts for good grades, a clean driving record, completing driver's education. Medical insurance does not. Another difference? Driving behaviors are a choice. Women do not choose their genetics, nor do they choose the density of their breasts. I certainly did not choose mine. When I was 9 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. Sorry, every time. She was an Omaha police officer. She was a marathon runner. She never smoked, and she rarely enjoyed a cocktail. Her lifestyle choices were about as healthy as one can get. Yet she was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 35 and unfortunately lost her battle at the age of 40. 40 is when most women begin breast imaging. My mom had already had 5 breast surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, and was dead at that milestone age. At the age of 19, I learned I too carried the BRCA1 gene mutation, giving me an 87% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer. In 2010, my insurance did not cover my genetic testing, even though I had a 50-50 chance of carrying the same mutation my mother had. I was subject to my deductible for my appointments and for my screenings, costing me thousands of dollars out of pocket each year. At the age of 22, I was proud to say I worked my way through college and graduated with no student loan debt. However, I graduated with $20,000 in medical debt. Weighing my cancer risk and my financial future, I chose to undergo a preventative bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction. My breast tissue was removed entirely. My pectoral was taken from my chest wall, attached to my skin, so my skin and my nipples would not fall off and die. I then had implants. My breasts now are purely aesthetic. I have no feeling or sensation, and I will never be able to breastfeed children. That is my story, but data also tells a story. Sears data shows 5-year survival rate for early stage breast cancer is 99%. On the contrary, 12% or 1 in 8 women with metastatic triple negative breast cancer, the same kind my mom had, will survive to 5 years. That number to me seems criminal, 1 in 8. Especially when we have the screening modalities to find this cancer early and to beat it. Women should not be dying from this disease. I testify here today in hopes that when another young woman contemplates the decision between annual breast screening or breast amputation, that cost is not a driving factor. And LB 145 has the ability to ensure that the cost will not be the determining factor in whether or not a woman lives or she dies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Preston. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you again.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Kim Danielson, Kimdanielson. And I am 46 years old. I'm married. I have 2 beautiful girls, ages 10 and 7. I work full-time outside the home, and I am a breast cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at stage 1 invasive breast cancer in December of 2021 after having a screening breast MRI. This shocked most people because I'm kind of known by my friends as the poster child of breast screening. I never miss an appointment. What was even more shocking to me is that I had a completely clean mammogram 6 months prior to my cancer diagnosis. Even at the time of my diagnosis, they could not see my cancer on a diagnostic mammogram. I was getting high-risk screening for a multitude of reasons. I do not have a genetic mutation like Brandy, but I do have a family history of breast cancer and dense breast tissue. Even though I was diagnosed with cancer, I truly consider myself lucky. I'll probably be one of the good stories that you get to hear today. My cancer was caught at a very early treatable stage, which allowed me to have options like a less invasive surgery, lumpectomy versus a mastectomy. My radiation wasn't as aggressive. And because I had not, the cancer had not advanced to my lymph nodes, I did not have to endure chemotherapy, which all those treatments we know can lead to lifelong side effects. I was fortunate though, because I had the means and financial ability to get my supplemental screening, which caught my cancer. Most women I know that qualify do not go on to get this because it is a financial burden to them, or they will go get their first breast MRI and decide it was expensive and can't continue on. My breast cancer was actually caught on my 4th breast MRI, so 4 years of screening. I find it hard to imagine what my journey and outcome would have been if I had not been getting these breast MRIs. The reality is what we've learned is that breast cancer diagnosed at an earlier stage are less expensive to treat than those diagnosed at late. Effective screening allows us to decrease the number of women diagnosed at late stage, detect cancer sooner when it's easier to treat, reduce healthcare spending, and overall save lives. The problem is mammograms are not enough. And if you have additional risk factors like family history and dense breast tissue, we know that supplemental screening like an ultrasound and breast MRI is recommended by guidelines, however, not affordable to most women. So I just want to thank you for your consideration and support for the bill to provide these screening for women that desperately need it. So
Thank you very much, Ms. Danielson. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Cal?
And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or not, but how much does it cost to do that, the ultrasound or the MRI?
So I know from an MRI, Brandy has some of these statistics, but I know like from an MRI standpoint, it's somewhere can be like $1,300 to $2,000, and it's subject to your deductible. So,
and then so is there, if you have the dense breast, is there any thought that you just say no mammograms and save that and go straight to these, or is the mammogram always going to be part of
mammograms are always still start of that process. So usually you alternate. So you'll get a mammogram, and then 6 months later you'll get your supplemental screening. So you get 2 different modalities once a year, but they're staggered to help offset.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Cal. Additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Danielson. Good morning.
Good morning. Chairwoman, thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Margaret Weppel, MargaretWeppel. I am the Vice President of Workforce Quality and Data with the Nebraska Hospital Association, and I am testifying in support of LB 145. About 1 in 8 U.S. women will develop invasive breast cancer over their lifetime. Nebraska ranks the 2nd highest category for breast cancer incidence and the 3rd highest category for breast cancer deaths. This year, in 2023, it is estimated that 1,670 Nebraska women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and 270 Nebraska women will die of breast cancer. We are seeing an increase in breast cancer diagnosis in younger women. In 2021, the CDC reported 9% of breast cancer cases were in women less than 45 years old. In Nebraska, 12% of breast cancer hospitalizations are in the age range from 18 to 45. On a personal note, as a female with a direct family history of breast cancer, I have been having annual breast examinations and mammograms since my 30s. I have always asked to use the most evidence-based mammography technology, even when it costs me out of pocket. Not everyone has the ability to pay additional out-of-pocket costs as I have. The late-stage breast cancer treatment is significantly more than early or preventative treatment. Investing in early, preventative, high-quality annual examinations will save money. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Weppel. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, oh, sorry, I thought your hand was a, thank you very much. Additional proponents? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Danielle Henriksen, DANIELLE HENRICKSEN. I'm the Cancer Center Director for Bryan Health and a radiologic technologist by background, spending a majority of my clinical time working in interventional radiology. I've worked at Bryan for 20 years, and I come to you today on behalf of the Nebraska Hospital Association and my hospital colleagues in support of LB 145. LB 145 expands health insurance coverage to include additional forms of diagnostic imaging, lowers the age at which screening is covered, and allows physicians the ability to personalize screening frequency to meet the needs of patients with complex medical histories that are under the age of 40. This bill allows physicians to order the imaging that is best for each individual patient. A traditional mammogram may not be the best imaging methodology for a patient with a dense breast tissue. Allowing the autonomy and expertise of the provider to prescribe the best screening methodology will result in more cancers being detected earlier and hopefully reduce the number of imaging studies required for patients as they get the most appropriate test first. The earlier we can detect a possible malignancy, the better. Removing barriers to screening is integral to early detection. To demonstrate this, I share the story of Becky. She received her annual mammogram where a small tumor was detected. Becky was feeling fine, and the tumor could not be felt on self-exam. It was detected early because of Becky's diligence in screening and her insurance provider allowing for this life-saving exam on an annual basis. She has completed treatment and is able to continue her vital role of wife, mom, and educator. Not all patients have the access and outcome that Becky had. LB 145 increases the number of Beckys we have living and thriving among us, being the wives, moms, friends, and neighbors we cherish as Nebraskans. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share the importance of cancer screening and how increased access to screening saves lives. As you hear from myself and others today, I ask that you be moved to take action in support of LB 145. Thank you for your time. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Director Henriksen. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Senators. I'm Ann Ames, ANNAMES, and I am the CEO for the Independent Insurance Agents of Nebraska. Our trade association represents 500 member agencies and 2,000 agents across the state of Nebraska, and we're here in support of LB 145. We firmly believe that this is an important piece of legislation that would enable women to get earlier screenings and better diagnostic imaging and give their physicians more control over their care. We definitely understand that this is a change in coverage and it has a cost. However, we recognize that prevention is the key to good health. And ultimately, protecting our clients is the primary goal of all independent insurance agents. Their safety, health, and well-being are at the center of the services that we provide. As we know, early detection is a key factor in improving the outcomes for women in breast cancer, and we believe that this bill is fundamentally the right thing to do. We believe it's good public policy, and we're asking that you support this and the health of Nebraska women moving forward. If this even saves one woman, can you put a price on saving the women in Nebraska, mothers, wives, leaders? So we ask that you support this. And I did also provide previous written testimony, but I thought if I could be here, I might as well. So
Thank you very much, Ms. Ames. We appreciate it. Are there any questions from the committee members? Senator Cal.
From an insurance perspective, is the cost of doing the additional cost for doing these additional treatments, does that outweigh the additional cost of if even one person gets the cancer? How does that affect all of your policyholders? So when you write these policies,
it's going to cost more, but I don't think that you can put a value on someone's life. So we believe that even if there is an additional cost, it's worth that.
Right, but what I'm saying is it would apply to all of your policyholders, correct?
I'm sure it
If
would,
someone
yes.
gets sick, it also applies to all of your policyholders because that would raise their insurance rates.
It has the potential to do so.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Slama. And I think my questions were along the same lines as Senator Cal. But generally speaking, is it in your professional opinion that the cost saving that we're going to get from prevention is maybe going to outweigh any increase in premiums moving forward?
Absolutely.
Do you have any estimates in terms of quantities or just?
I don't off the top of my head, but cancer treatment is definitely going to be more expensive for Nebraska than prevention.
And so if we drive down the amount of people who need to be treated for cancer in the long term, that's going to save money overall and probably have a positive impact on premiums, or at least try not to drive them up that much.
We certainly think so. And additionally, there's societal costs that we're not factoring into this, because when people are sick, it affects our entire economy. It affects their ability to work. It affects their ability to care for their children. And so then there's additional costs that, come as a result of being sick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duncan. Senator Jacobson. Oh, you're good.
You asked my question.
Wow. We're getting good at this. Any additional committee questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Eihusen, KellieihUsen. I received my doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Nebraska Medical Center in 2015. And as of last year, I am the only one in Nebraska with a board certification specialty in oncology physical therapy. We are here today to talk about the importance of accessibility and early detection for women in healthcare, but especially those with breast cancer. From a physical therapy standpoint, we understand that the earlier detection and the least invasive surgeries lead to decreased chemotherapies, decreased radiation treatments, and from a physical standpoint, decreased impairments. From my standpoint and expertise, when you have people who are diagnosed at later stages, they have impact to their posture, upper extremity function, neuropathies, they're at higher risk for cardiac toxicities, pulmonary toxicities, and have decreased bone density, changes to their muscle mass, and are in and out of the hospital and in and out of rehab more frequently than those who are diagnosed earlier. For me, I would say a limiting factor for access to care is cost. So when I see my patients, I have to always consider cost of what they're going through with cancer treatments and their ability to attend appointments. If they cannot afford it, they tend to come less, and that care gets exaggerated out over a longer length of time, and they ultimately spend more money within and place more burden on healthcare systems. For another comment, I did do some research, and the American Cancer Society recently put out a study that in 2019 that was based on statistics from 2015 alone. It was found in that study that an expected 8.7 million years of life were going to be lost within the United States out of cancer deaths, and $9.4 billion of future spending would be eliminated from the economy because of those deaths and inaccessibility for return to life roles and job roles. Of that 9.4 billion, 6.2 billion were going to be directly from breast cancer diagnoses alone. My role in people's survivorship and plans of care is to provide quality along with their quantity of care. If they're surviving, why are they surviving, and how can I promote them to go back into those life and work roles? So I definitely see the late impacts, the chronic impairments and the importance of finding detection early so that these women can stay in their roles in all aspects of their life.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ihusen. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Ballard.
Thank you, Chair Salma. Thank you for being here. So I know it's going to differ, but what is the average duration for someone with a breast cancer diagnosis to spend in physical therapy?
So I would say in the state of Nebraska, we're actually doing a pretty great job of leading the country in breast cancer rehabilitation. We request and we have found, the American Physical Therapy Association has found that it's actually cheaper on the healthcare system and insurance if we do a pre-operative appointment. So we see people at time of diagnosis, but prior to their surgery or impact of care, then follow as necessary, whether that's with chemotherapies prior to care or whatever that need may be to keep them healthy and in their life roles. We see them definitely about a week and a half after surgery, and then as needed at that time, and then throughout radiation. From there on, it is recommended best practice that we see patients every 4 to 5 months as a surveillance screen for 5 years after diagnosis. And again, all of that has demonstrated pretty well in the literature to overall cost insurance and the economy less. It depends, and I will say that with those that are detected early and have less invasive surgeries, and therefore they might not need chemo beforehand and or less radiation treatments, their plans of care are very small. For those with, triple negative breast cancers, those with bilateral mastectomies, long bouts of radiation, and increased chemotherapies, you're looking at a significant amount of comorbidities and increased cost to the system. We keep people alive longer with breast cancers, but they're at a higher risk actually of dying of cardiac diseases because of their radiation and chemotherapy exposures.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Alan Thorson, A-L-A-N. Last name is T-H-O-R-S-O-N. I am testifying in support of LB 145 on behalf of the Nebraska Medical Association, representing nearly 3,000 physicians, residents, and medical students across the entire state of Nebraska. Senator Slama, thank you for the opportunity. Senator Dungan, Senator Ballard, Senator Kopp, Senator Jacobson, Senator Aguilar, Senator Von Gillern. I have provided some written testimony, being respectful of both your time and the time of those behind me who still want to testify. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to give you a very brief clinician's view of what LB 145 means. Previous Nebraska legislatures have recognized the health benefits of breast cancer screening. However, current statute no longer recognizes the current recommendations of the American Cancer Society. LB 145 would update statute to recognize those recommendations. Secondly, the current statute deals with screening for average risk patients. It does not take into consideration the high-risk patients, some of which you already heard about. This includes family history, genetic alterations, dense breast tissue. For those patients that have increased risk, there's an issue called supplemental breast cancer screening. LB 145 does a nice job of defining supplemental breast cancer screening and does a nice job of distinguishing that from diagnostic breast imaging. In summary, from the clinician standpoint, Nebraska statute at the present time does not provide the same life-saving benefits for high-risk breast cancer patients, the ones who really need to be carefully observed, as it does for average risk patients. LB 145 does a great job of equalizing this playing field for our high-risk patients. I urge you as committee members to support LB 145 here in the committee and also once the bill comes to the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thorson. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Michelle Worley, MICHELLEWEHRLY, and I am here in support of LB 145. I am a nurse practitioner that works in Lincoln and Omaha. For the past 10 years, my practice has been focused on not only breast cancer patients, but those at high risk due to what everybody else has said in terms of personal history, family history, genetic mutations. I'm going to be kind of short and sweet because I know there's a lot of people behind me that want to talk, but I will say that my biggest complaint for my high-risk women is the cost aspect. To piggyback off of what Kim said, a lot of women can't afford to go forth with these additional screenings that have been recommended by their providers due to that out-of-pocket. I had a patient call me that said, Michelle, my options are either to pay my mortgage or have my breast MRI. And that to me is terrible. We need to do better for these women. So I am asking for your support with this bill, and I thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Worley. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you very much for being here. Good morning.
Good morning. I am Annie Hasselbeck, ANNIE HASSELBALCH. If you get that right at the end, I'll give you a quarter. I am here, and the thing that has struck me the most about this opportunity, even the previous LB, was we're all talking about numbers. That's been a lot of the questions. 1 is a number I want you to remember. It took 1 breast screening MRI for me to be diagnosed with breast cancer that was in my lymph nodes. My age was 38. I endured radiation, which cost $77,000 in cash. My surgery cost $37,000 for the surgery alone. Anesthesia was $7,864. The years I am in physical therapy is to be determined. I'm a physically active, healthy female that enjoys all of the great things in Nebraska: horseback riding, going to the lake, running, hanging with my dogs. I still go to physical therapy once a week. My year diagnosis will be March 11th of 2023. I will be 3 years out. So when you look at the cost of what breast cancer treatment is, it is exorbitant. The average cost of an MRI in Nebraska cash is $1,250. And as Michelle previously so eloquently stated, not everyone in Nebraska has access to the amazing healthcare that I do. I work in reimbursement on the insurance side every day. I can navigate the healthcare system and get what I need. I feel extremely blessed with the knowledge that I have, the insurance coverage that I have, and the fact that I just don't take no for an answer very well. That's the Nebraska thing. My ask is in your support for this bill is that every woman should have the opportunity to return to the quality of life that I have been so fortunate to be able to get access to. I would not even want to count. I know my physical therapy bill for just this year is over $3,000. I'm having an MRI actually tomorrow at Lakeside in Omaha. That's about, I think my insurance is like $2,000. So moving forward, I would just like you to keep those numbers in mind, but the most important one is 1, and that was me. It took 1 screening to find my cancer, and it was still in my lymph nodes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hasselbeck. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for sharing your story. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Martin-Dick, TANYA-MARTIN-DICK. Thank you for this opportunity this morning. I live here in Lincoln, Nebraska. I am a wife, a mother of 2, vice president at Union Bank and Trust, was an avid runner.
and I'm now currently a member of the nonprofit board for the Lobular Breast Cancer Alliance. It is a national organization. On November 24th of 2020, at the age of 47, I got that dreaded phone call. You have ductal carcinoma in situ. I was assured that it had been caught very early. In fact, I was referred to a surgeon, and a lumpectomy was what was probably in my future. I was fortunate enough to have a fabulous friend, Annie Hasselbeck, who you just heard. And she encouraged me to go see a high-risk specialist, Mary Jane Glade. In her wisdom, Mary Jane ordered an MRI to make sure that we knew what we were up against. We were shocked to find out that I had in my dense breast tissue a tumor that was 3.2 by 4 centimeters. It had gone undetected on mammogram for the prior 4 years. Obviously, this completely changed the trajectory of my care. I would then undergo a double mastectomy because that tumor could not be removed without removing the entire breast. I also underwent 4 months of chemotherapy. I lost my hair, I lost my toenails. I went through extensive physical therapy for lymphedema that is a constant for me now. Had LB 145 been in place, my story might have been different. You see, for years, my doctors told me that I had very dense breast tissue. I did not have a genetic disposition, but I was never offered anything other than a mammogram, and I was faithful in going to get my mammograms. The cost of my health care over the last 2 years has exceeded $250,000. Today, I ask you and I urge you to please support LB 145, not for me, but for the women that will come after me, and specifically for my 18-year-old daughter.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Shawn McCarville, SHAWN-MCCARVILLE. I am here this morning to share my story and hopefully prevent the women that follow from the financial toxicity that I endured because of a gene mutation that I did not ask for. My mom was diagnosed with metastatic disease at age 29 and lost her battle at 33, leaving behind 2 daughters, age 6 and 3. With my family history, it has always been a weight on my shoulders. When I was 24 in 2019, I was tested and it was discovered that I carried the same gene that Brandy had discussed, leaving me with an 87% chance lifetime risk of getting breast cancer. That led me to start surveillance every 6 months, it was recommended to do MRIs. My insurance was not supportive, seeing as I was only 24 years old. I had to pay $1,800 every 6 months out of pocket, but that didn't matter to me. I would go into debt knowing that my family wouldn't have to go through what they did with my mother. Fast forward to 2021, I had a beautiful daughter, and it was put into perspective on how real this disease is. I was given the opportunity to change my future and be there for my daughter's graduation, wedding, and hopefully meet my grandchildren someday by having a prophylactic double mastectomy. I am here so that my sister, who gets the same genetic test this year, doesn't have to get into a mountain of debt in order to possibly save her life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carville. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Good morning, Senator
Good
Slama,
morning.
members of the committee. My name is Laura Shablowski, LauraSchablowske. I'm here on behalf of the Nebraska Cancer Coalition, also known as NC2, in support of LB 145. NC2 is committed to providing an environment for conversation to work on a variety of perspectives, voices with partners across the state to connect our vision of conquering cancer together. Our purpose is clear: to be the neutral voice of oncology in our state. We are affiliated with every major health system, all accredited cancer centers, all oncology practices, advanced practice providers, and primary care physicians in all 93 counties of Nebraska. We're leading the charge to increase access to cancer screening, including breast cancer screening, to improve the quality of life of those that live in our state. You've heard many statistics and a lot of numbers today. I'll ask you to remember this. 13% of Nebraskans will be impacted by breast cancer. 1 in 8 women. Those of high risk currently face an inequity in the way our statute is written. We do not reflect the recommendations for early cancer detection that the American Cancer Society recommends for women. All the statistics are in the testimony provided in a written format for you today. For women at high risk, including those with family history, gene mutation, dense breast tissue, and other factors, LB 145 is a game changer. As a woman myself who is at high risk, this bill would have changed my trajectory as well. We empower each of you to think not only of those that you know, but of those that you serve. LB 145 will provide will balance the inequity scale that we have today. For these reasons, NC2 strongly urges you as members of the committee to support LB 145, not only here in the committee, but when it reaches the legislative floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shablowski.
Impressive.
I do my best. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Good morning, Senator Slama and committee. My name is Dr. Lynna Bostwick, and I am here on behalf of the Nebraska Nurses Association, which is 30,000 nurses in Nebraska. And we're supporting this bill, LB 145. My practice, I am an educator, so I'm a doctor of nursing education. And the Nebraska Nurses Association supports LB 145, and we wish that you will do the same. I'm not going to read the statistics that you've already heard, but there are some that are important to repeat. And I do believe that nationally, 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. And we know about every 5 to 6 years, this changes and the risks increase, and we see higher numbers. The other statistics I'm going to give you is about Nebraska. According to the Nebraska Cancer Incidence and Mortality for women only in Nebraska, in May 2021, this was reported on page 21, breast cancer is the most common type of cancer among women and the second most frequent cause of female cancer deaths. Between 2014 and 2018, 7,263 Nebraska women were diagnosed with invasive breast cancer. Another 1,465 were diagnosed with inside the place where the cancer started was within the breast. And 1,188 women died from breast cancer itself. What I would like to let you know also is I have a first cousin. My mother-in-law, my grandmother are survivors, thank goodness. I have to tell you a little bit about my mother-in-law. She had 2 strokes. And this has probably been about 5 years ago now. What she found out, she was a trooper at going and a role model for us at doing her mammography. She kept her appointment even during these true strokes. And what she found out is that her strokes were caused because she did have a mutation type of breast cancer. So it has saved a lot of her further. She got early treatment that way, and also further health care related to having strokes. She hasn't not had another stroke because it caused her platelets to be high. LB 145 revision speaks to routine breast assessments for early detection and clarifies the assessments needed for women under the age of 40 years, which is a progressive move for beating breast cancer in our state, and I would hope other states could follow this as well. The Nebraska Nurses Association asks you to move LB 145 out of committee to general file. And thank you for hearing us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bostwick. First question, could you please spell
I
your name for
would.
the record?
Why do I do that every time? I want to
I
get
do
right
the
to
same
it.
thing.
LINABOSTWICK.
Thank you,
Thank you
Doctor.
very
Are there any
much.
questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Von Gilleren.
Thank you, Dr. Bostwick, for being here today. And I just want to, I have to leave early for another hearing. I need to testify in another hearing. So I just couldn't leave without thanking each one of you for being here today, particularly Ms. Preston and Ms. McCarville, who were so brave to take the positive actions that you did. My mother made that decision in 1973 and lived for decades afterwards because of the bravery of making the decision to have a double bilateral mastectomy. It's very personal to me. I have 7 breast cancer stories in my family. And like Ms. Martin Dick, the one that I worry about the most is my 31-year-old daughter. And so this is very personal. And you can probably hear that in my voice. But thank you all for being here today. Forgive me for violating protocol. I don't think there was a question in there anywhere. I didn't want to, I couldn't leave without making that statement. So thank you all for being here today.
Yeah, and I have the same concern. My daughter, who is 28, this is her grandmother. So early detection could protect her from having strokes. So I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Gilleren. Any additional questions? Thank you, Doctor. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Virus, VIRUS. I am here in support of Bill LB 145. This is important for me for a few reasons. I myself have the BRCA2 mutation. I have an aunt or a sister and a cousin with it. Most recently, we found out my 20-year-old daughter had it. I think the reason foremost is for this coming and testifying is because I don't want her to put off her screenings when it's time because of the cost. She's going through nursing school. She's trying to, do all the things right, pay off her school debt as she goes. So having to go through the MRIs and the mammograms as are laid out in the recommendations would get kind of costly for her for being so young. The second reason, I run the Hereditary Cancer Foundation, and we talk about and support people who have genetic mutations. We talk about why it's important to find out your status, because what we've known and heard is when we catch it early, we can take action upon it. So I would really urge you to consider moving forward with this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Virus. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. All right, additional proponent testimony for LB 145. Last call for proponent testimony. Seeing none, we'll now open it up for any opposition testimony to LB 145. Seeing none, we'll now accept neutral testimony for LB 145. Welcome back, Mr. Blakey.
Good morning again. Again, my name is Jeremiah Blakey, spelled Jeremiah, B as in boy, Lake. I'm the Government Affairs Associate and Registered Lobbyist for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska. And I'm testifying in a neutral capacity on LB 145, specifically the white copy amendment that Senator Bostar circulated. I just want to first of all thank all the testifiers for showing up today and sharing their story. It takes a lot of courage. There's also a breast cancer survivor in my family as well, so this is very personal to me as well. I appreciate that Senator Bostar has taken this issue on. At Blue Cross, we share this commitment to increasing screening rates for women across Nebraska. Under our health plans, breast cancer screenings are covered as a preventative service for women beginning at age 40. This means that women are eligible for an annual screening without any cost share. We also cover breast cancer genetic screening and counseling at 100% for women with a family history of breast cancer or who meet other criteria. Preventative health measures, such as breast cancer screening, can help avoid developing health problems and prevent minor issues from becoming major health concerns. I also appreciate Senator Bostar's efforts to draft this bill in a way that ensures that women are screened using evidence-based practices. Specifically, the amendment circulated by Senator Bostar references the National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines for breast cancer screening and diagnosis. It really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Blue Cross also uses these guidelines to write our medical policies for breast cancer because they are the gold standard. However, there is one area in this amendment that strays from those guidelines, and that is to require coverage for MRIs for women with dense breast tissue. I appreciate everybody testifying today, and I want to clarify that there are always unique circumstances, and this isn't clinical guidance. These are guidelines that are published by accredited organizations. According to the American Cancer Society, MRIs are not recommended for women who have a lifetime risk of breast cancer that is less than 15%. We want to make sure that women are screened and cancer is detected early, but we also strive to find the balance between the benefits of higher levels of screening and the value they provide. In the future, if we begin to see that MRI screenings expand to circumstances that are not supported by evidence or best practice, it's my hope that we can work with the parties in this room to ensure that MRI screenings are used only in those cases where it is medically necessary. The one thing I would raise as a technical issue, and the only request that I'm making on this bill, is that we would appreciate an effective date of January 1 of 2024 to align this bill with the health plan contract cycles. With that, I appreciate your attention and would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello again, Mr. Bell.
Good morning, Chairwoman Slama. Is this still morning?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
We've got about 50 minutes left.
All right. And members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee, my name is Robert M. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I'm the Executive Director and Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation. I am here today in a neutral capacity on LB 145. I think Mr. Blakey has stolen all of my thunder. I want to make a notation that I appreciate Senator Bostar working with the insurance committee or the insurance industry on this legislation. I think he approached us in December and had even mentioned this before, that this was an issue that was close to him and wanted to work on it. And so we appreciate his willingness to listen to our concerns related to cost containment related to this. And you know, it seems, you know, why would we ever have cost sharing on any kind of cancer screening, right? I mean, that's always the question, because won't the insurers and our policyholders and the premium folks, people that pay the premium, won't they have savings if we catch cancer early? Absolutely, they will. But right now we have a situation in our country where, according to CMS, you know, 18.3 of our entire GDP is going to healthcare services. That's $4.3 trillion. The average American is responsible for $12,914 of that. For my family of 5, that is $64,570 a year. That is our responsibility of that. And so, as particularly after the passage of the Affordable Care Act, which had many good provisions, but also some other provisions that we struggled to pay for as a society, that, you know, we've been struggling to get our hands around cost containment related to healthcare services, right? And so one of the reasons we have cost sharing and utilization tools in insurance policies is to drive consumer behavior, right? So, or also provider behavior. If there is a situation where, you know, let's say, pick on MRIs because it's been talked about a lot today, but if we're required to use MRIs, how do we negotiate that discount with that provider? As an example, that those negotiations become a little bit more difficult. So oftentimes you see what the bills charged are versus the negotiated discount of the insurer. That's all part of the equation. And again, I just really appreciate Senator Bostar reaching out to us. We provided him some language. He has accepted that. Again, it was great hearing all this testimony today. Definitely not an expert on mammography and cancer screening, but I do appreciate the opportunity to testify. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, what? Oh.
All right, my best to Cosmo. So
I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, additional neutral testimony for LB 145. Seeing none, Senator Bostar, you're welcome to close. And as you approach, we've got letters for the record on LB 145. There are, oh, fantastic. 19 proponent letters, 0 opponent, and 0 neutral letters.
Thank you, Chair Slama and members of the committee, for your attention and your patience. I wanted to real quickly talk about a few of the things that Mr. Blakey brought up. And first of all, I want to thank Mr. Bell and Mr. Blakey for working with me on this legislation over countless meetings. It was brought up that one of the provisions here that strays from ACA is, for example, the MRI requirements for dense tissue. That's actually not in this white copy amendment. So I'll draw your attention to line 15 on page 2. Line 15 through line 21 is the MRI section of the white copy. And it includes for, what could prompt coverage for screening for an MRI. Family or personal history of breast cancer, prior atypical breast biopsy, B, positive genetic testing, or C, a history of chest radiation, which would then lead to 1 diagnostic magnetic resonance imaging each year. The dense tissue does appear in the ultrasound paragraph, which starts on line 8, I think. Yes, and it also appears in the sort of the 3D mammogram, the tomosynthesis, starting on line 1 on that same page. So I just wanted to clear that up, that actually the dense tissue is not part of the MRI specific provisions in this bill. Also, Mr. Blakey asked for an operative date of January 1, 2024. That's already included in the white copy as well. So I wanted to cover those two things real quick as feedback. And this will come up this afternoon on bills, but to speak briefly on why we have screening and what screening means versus, for example, diagnostic when we're doing different kinds of testing. Philosophically, our medical system tries to treat screening as a procedure to be done without cost sharing, because the cost savings of being able to catch different diseases, cancers, are far outweighed by the cost of the procedure itself. Whereas a diagnostic exam, right, that's different. That's where we're subject to cost sharing, generally within our healthcare system. So that's why mammograms don't have cost sharing, because they're screening. They're there to catch cancer. which we've all determined is worth it because we're saving lives and a lot of resources and money, because as Senator Cal rightfully points out that, healthcare is extremely expensive and premiums are extremely expensive. So we have to be really good stewards of managing that. For some women, the mammogram is not an effective screen. So what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, we believe screenings shouldn't have cost sharing because we want to incentivize women to be able to be screened for breast cancer. So if the mammogram is an inadequate screening technique, then we need to create the appropriate technique to be considered screening. And that's the impetus for this bill. And that's what we're doing here, is we're making sure that all women can have access to breast cancer screening, because not every woman can use a mammogram for that purpose successfully. And I was really pleased to hear from so many of the survivors here today, but we should keep in mind that the ones that we don't have the opportunity to hear from. And so I would appreciate your support of LB 145. Again, I thank you for your time and consideration, and I will answer any other questions if you have them.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Senator Jacobson.
Thank you, Chair Slama and Senator Bostar. Thank you for bringing this bill. It sounds like we're none too early on getting this bill brought to the committee, and clearly we need to move this forward. I guess my question, and I'm sympathetic to the insurance industry, and I appreciate their neutral testimony today, and I think certainly Mr. Bell, his clarification on really what we're trying to do. I guess my question is on that line 15 through 22, or through 21, which is, as I understand, will be stricken from, that will not be part of the changes. Are we comfortable that that's going to achieve what you've just laid out in terms of effectively getting the proper screening done for all women with all situations at no cost?
Are you asking if the current text of the bill, of the white copy amendment?
Yes.
Is adequate?
Correct.
As I'm not a doctor.
But you look like one.
Yeah. Said no one ever. When the healthcare providers who are experts in this field tell me that this legislation that's representing the white copy amendment will save lives, help women, I trust them. And so
so you're comfortable with this change?
I'm comfortable with the text in the white copy.
Perfect.
And,
thank you.
And really, I mean, the number of people that have been involved in working on this is really humbling. And so I want to thank everyone and everyone that just showed up today as well, and to tell their stories.
Well, and I do also appreciate the fact the insurance industry has been willing to sit down and work with you on this and get a reasonable solution to a problem that's certainly a huge problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll bring to a close our hearing on LB 145. Just thank you all so much, whether you're survivors or healthcare providers, for being here today. It really means a lot. So thank you.
Yeah.
What can I say? Yeah. Okay, that's good. And I'll ask anybody who's planning to be a proponent on either LB 142 or 779 to make your way to the front of the room. That way we're minimizing travel time. It's not church. We're very welcoming here. All right. Slip that. Okay, we will now open the hearing. This will be a joint hearing for LB 142 and LB 779 Just a note to anybody testifying today, if you're not in support or opposition to both bills, be sure to note which bill you're testifying on. That way we've got a clean committee record. But with that, Senator Briese, you're welcome to open.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. I'm Tom Briese, T-O-M-B-R-I-E-S-E. I represent District 41, and I'm here to introduce LB 142. And I might add, I think this is my first trip before the BCI Committee in all the years I've been here.
Glad to have you.
It's an honor to be here. Yeah. This bill in a nutshell would limit the copay of an insured to no more than $100 per month for a 30-day supply of insulin. Insulin is literally necessary for survival for many Nebraskans, but in the face of this, insulin prices have skyrocketed in the past 2 decades. One insulin product is 1,200% higher than it in 1998. And according to the Healthcare Cost Institute, insulin prices doubled between 2012 and 2016, and they've only gone up since then. Some of our diabetic friends and neighbors are paying over $1,000 a month for a 30-day supply. And the issue is one that I've experienced. I have a close family member who's a type 1 diabetic, and she tells me her first vial of insulin costs $3. That's a far cry from today's price of several hundred. And as a self-employed farmer, there were times that our insurance was not particularly helpful in picking up those costs. So I have lived that, but my family is fortunate enough now to have outstanding health insurance that nearly covers the cost of our insulin. So we are taken care of, but many or most Nebraskans have limited insurance coverage. So what can be done about this? Over 20 states have taken steps to cap the insulin copays for their residents, most of them at $100 per month or less. I would say the average is 50 to 75 probably, many of them 25, 35, some 75s and some hundreds in there. And I would submit that we should do the same thing. And with that, I will close and turn it over to Senator Bostar, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Senator Briese. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank
Yes.
you.
Real quick.
Senator
So
Cowell.
you said the average cost, or you've heard of people who pay up to $1,000 a month?
Heard of people, yes.
Do you know what the average is?
I do not know. Great question. I do not know.
All right. Thank you, Senator Cowell. Any additional questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Senator Briese.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Bostar, you're welcome to open on LB 779. Hello again.
Hello again. Good morning, hopefully still, Chair Slama and fellow members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. For the record, my name is Elliot Bostar. That's E-L-I-O-T-B-O-S-T-A-R. And I represent Legislative District 29. Today, I'm presenting LB 779, which proposes to cap out-of-pocket expense for prescription insulin to no more than $35 per month. According to the American Diabetes Association, about 13,500 Nebraskans are diagnosed with diabetes every year, and approximately 141,500 Nebraskans, or 9.6% of the adult population, are diabetic. People with diabetes have medical expenses roughly 2.3 times higher than those who do not. In 2017, diabetic Nebraskans spent an estimated $993 million in direct medical expenses, and an additional $384 million was spent in indirect costs from lost productivity due to the disease. Diabetes is one of the most pervasive, deadly, and expensive diseases in the United States. According to a recent study by the American Diabetes Association, annual insulin prices rose 55% between 2014 and 2019, from an average of $3,819 to $5,917. And we know that it continues to increase year after year. The increasing cost for this life-saving medication is creating hardships on Nebraska families. LB 779 seeks to address this problem and alleviate the financial burden on diabetic Nebraskans by capping the out-of-pocket cost of insulin to insured individuals to $35 per 30-day supply. 21 states, including Texas, Alabama, Colorado, Kentucky, Utah, and Virginia, I won't list them all, have passed legislation similar to LB 779. Congress also took action when it passed legislation that capped the out-of-pocket expense for Medicare beneficiaries to $35 per month supply of insulin last year. I urge the committee to advance LB 779. Thank you for your time this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Actually, real quick, the amendment, after working with the insurance providers on this legislation for a little while, we've come up with language that hopefully they will confirm is agreeable to their policies. And what it does is it would cap the cost of insulin for the provider's base tier of insulin. And I think that they will testify and talk about what's happening within the healthcare world that might make that change necessary, as well as it outlines that if there's due to a shortage, if that tier of insulin is unavailable, then insulin they provide cannot exceed $35. So the bill would still create an environment where anyone could get insulin for no more than $35 per month. Just changing that language a little bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions, Senator Cal?
Thank you, Senator Slama. The national shortage, how is that determined? Is that an announcement that is made, or we're identifying a national shortage and there's a time that it stops, or how does that process?
Essentially, if the suppliers don't have the insulin that's in that base tier, that would be a catastrophic national shortage. And that was put in as, I don't believe there's ever been a shortage to that extent where that level of insulin is unavailable. But that language, and we worked on this, the language was included as a means of just, it's a reassurance that to folks who need this, that if for some reason that insulin goes away, they won't be subject to higher prices.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Any additional committee questions? See none, thanks, Senator Bostar.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up for proponent testimony on LB 142 and LB 779. Good morning.
Good morning again. Chair Slama and members of the committee, my name is Dr. Leslie Spry, L-E-S-L-I-E-S-P-R-Y, and I am testifying in support of both LB 142 and LB 779 on behalf of the Nebraska Medical Association. I'm a kidney guy, as I mentioned earlier, here in Lincoln, and I've served as a member of the Nebraska Board of Health as well as past president of the Nebraska Medical Association. The Nebraska Medical Association supports LB 142 and LB 779, both of which would cap the cost of insulin for Nebraska patients. Part of the NMA's mission statement is to advocate for the health of all Nebraskans. With that mission comes a belief that no person should have to choose whether they receive life-saving medication solely based on cost. Roughly 8.4 million Americans need insulin to maintain their health, and this number is expected to continue to rise over the next decade. I've certainly seen it in my practice. I've said that diabetes is taking over the earth in my experience. According to the prescription drug discount provider GoodRx, the average retail price for insulin rose 54% from 2014 to 2019. When patients have difficulty affording these medications and these necessary medications, they often make desperate decisions, including rationing their insulin supply, and I've certainly seen that, which have deadly consequences. Non-adherence due to high insulin costs lead to increased healthcare costs overall and more, including more hospitalizations, emergency room visits, increased risk of kidney disease, by the way, and increased mortality rates. Parenthetically, I saw somebody yesterday who was a Medicare beneficiary, where she was rejoicing the fact that her cost of her copay on her insulin in January went down from $135 a month to $35 a month because she's a Medicare recipient. And I would hope we could extend this same joy to other Nebraskans who have commercial insurance. For these reasons, then NMA supports the advancement of the legislation that would cap insulin costs for Nebraska patients. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spry, the kidney guy.
Yes.
I couldn't help but say it. Any questions?
That's my Twitter handle, by the way, too.
There we go. That's a great Twitter handle. Any questions from the committee? Senator Cow.
Thank you. Who would pay the difference? Would it be the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, or other policy holders? How does that get worked out?
So I'm not going to be an expert in all those tiers, but what I can tell you is what's happened over the last 20 years is a phenomenon of genetics. I can change insulin by changing one peptide on that insulin, and all of a sudden I can qualify for a new longer period of exclusivity, so I can charge more for it. And they keep doing that over and over and over. It doesn't change any of the clinical use of that insulin. What it does is just change the molecular characteristics of the drug, but doesn't actually change its clinical characteristics or therapeutic benefits. And so the pharmaceutical companies have repeatedly done this. They can make insulin, they could make some of the older insulins much, much cheaper, but if they change it by one peptide, they can get a new a patent from the FDA on that. And so that's what's been the genesis of this. I come out with a new insulin, but it's not really new and it doesn't change anything. So going back to some of these older insulins, what happened was that they could make a lot more money on that. So when you talked about a nationwide shortage, there certainly has been. And it's because there are fewer and fewer pharmaceutical companies that are actually having lines that make some of these cheaper insulins. This will probably force some of those increased lines of cheaper insulins to be made as a result of that. And that, at least that's my hope and prayer, because I work at Clinic with a Heart, and we can get access to some very cheap insulin over there. But it does have some limited access. But I can still go back and use that if somebody's going to ration the new insulin that I'm giving them. So.
Thank you very much.
Senator Jacobson.
I'd like to just follow up a little bit on that. And again, although it may not sound like I'm sensitive to insurance companies, I am, and I recognize that somebody has to pay the tab, and ultimately we got to try to figure out who that is. And when we deal with pharmaceuticals, there's a lot of players and there's some bad actors out there. And I continue to look at pharmacy benefit managers that I look at in a very jaunted sort of way. And there's a bill coming that's going to be addressing that. And I can't wait for that bill to get here. I would tell you that I'm concerned about, you hear about the pharmaceutical manufacturers, as you've outlined, making one slight change to be able to extend the patents. That's something I'm hoping the federal government would do something about. But I kind of wonder, to what extent can those that went off a patent that haven't had that small peptide change, could that still be produced at a cheaper cost? And I'm curious as to whether or not that can be done, because I don't expect the insurance providers to continue to pay these exorbitant costs either. And so I'm trying to figure out if it's the pharmaceutical manufacturers or it's the pharmacy benefit managers, or who the bad actor is in this process as it relates to insulin.
Well, I think Medicare changing over to this capping the cost is going to put some pressure, and there's going to be some pharmaceutical manufacturers who will put a line in to produce some of those insulins, because although they can't, their unit price is going to be lower, you're talking about bulk quantity here. And so I think that's probably would be the greatest mover out there on this. And it took a while to get that done. I mean, we've known about this scam about single peptide change for 20 years. And so my hope is that Medicare is going to push this, and then those production lines should then go online. Now, do I make those decisions? I don't. But I certainly advocate for my folks who have to pay for this insulin, and see some of these folks that are paying exorbitant prices for some of the newer insulins. That again, a minor change. It doesn't result in any dose change or anything else. All it does is just put a new name on it.
Thank you.
That's what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Dungan.
Thank you, Chair Slama. Thank you for being here, Dr. Spry. As an aside, you treated my grandfather for a short period of
I'm
time. But prior to his passing away, we actually talked about you and how much he appreciated the work you've done. So thank you so much for your ongoing contributions to the community and for being here. I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Your grandfather's name?
His name was Ed Lothridge.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little while ago, a few years ago. But in addition to that, my question for you is you talked a little bit about having seen people ration their insulin supplies, and that can have deadly consequences. I mean, in your professional experience, and I know you focus more on kidneys, but just being a doctor and working in and around this world, if people don't have access to insulin or sufficient supplies of insulin moving forward and they decide to ration it, I assume that can have negative consequences medically and lead to higher cost procedures and higher cost needs down the road. Is that fair to say?
Certainly too. When they start rationing it, they're letting their blood sugars get higher and higher. That leads to complications, cardiovascular complications, heart complications, amputations. Early on in my business, it used to be the case that a dialysis patient lost a limb a year. And as we got better control, insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitoring, some of the other drugs that are now used, we're seeing a lot less amputations than we ever did. And we're also cardiovascular complications just alone, strokes, high blood pressure, all those things. So leaving your diabetes, your hemoglobin A1C be higher, even though you can live, okay, and pay the mortgage, as someone I think mentioned here, that doesn't necessarily mean that you live well. And I've certainly seen that, where again, amputations and those kinds of things are common accompaniments of poorly controlled diabetes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Spry. Additional proponents for LB 142 or LB 779 or both? Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, my name's Anya Mishra. I'm a senior at Miller North High School, and I'm here for a CTE advocacy from HOSA, but I decided to talk here as well. So I apologize if I'm not as polished or well-educated about this topic as others, but I wanted to give a perspective of patients that are affected by this issue. I moved to America when I was about 3 years old. I didn't know any English. My family was low income and uninsured. And I spent most of my childhood being low income and uninsured. And I had this conception and this idea that if I did get insured, that healthcare would be significantly more accessible to me and my family as well. And now I do have insurance. We're not low income anymore. But what I did realize once we did get insured is that being insured doesn't necessarily mean access to healthcare. And my family, my dad is diabetic. I'm pre-diabetic, and my family has a history of diabetes throughout almost every generation of our family. We're very deeply affected by it. And even though we have insurance now, we don't have the proper access to healthcare that I thought that we would have. Insurance doesn't fix everything. Having limited copays is the solution to access to healthcare, because insurance can't just be the solution to everything. Currently, my father takes multiple pills for his diabetes, and he's delaying going to the doctor because insulin costs so much. And he knows if he does go, he might get prescribed insulin. And he doesn't want to face the reality that even though we're much more well off now, we have good insurance, paying for insulin is just not possible. For the average American household, that's the case. And I believe that's why LB 142 and 772 should be brought to the floor.
Thank you very much, Ani. Are there any questions from the committee? I've got a few. So you said you're a state officer in HOSA. What's your office?
I'm vice president.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Are you interested in going into healthcare?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. What specifically?
Probably either becoming a doctor or healthcare policy.
Nice. All right. Well, I remember CTSO Day fondly. I was a former FBLA state officer, so don't hold that against me.
I just took a picture with the FBLA officers. So.
They're pretty cool. I married the DECA state president. Oh. I mean, I know, it's like, yeah, the CTSO people will get it, but.
The state advisors were very much against that.
Yes,
Can't
we
mix
were
them.
graduated and he's much older than I am, yes. Thank you, Ani. I appreciate you being here today. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
All right, additional proponents.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Chair Slama, members of the committee, my name is Kelsey Ahrens. That's KelseyArends, and I'm the Healthcare Access Program Staff Attorney at Nebraska Appleseed, testifying in support of both bills today on behalf of Nebraska Appleseed. One of our core priorities is working to ensure that all Nebraskans have access to quality, affordable healthcare. Because these bills make insulin more affordable for Nebraskans who rely on it, Nebraska Appleseed supports both bills. We consistently hear from Nebraskans about the burden of healthcare costs and how that impacts their access, as you've heard really compelling testimony. For folks who have been prescribed insulin, more than 1 in 6 manage those costs by going to extreme measures to ration the insulin drugs that they need. And we know that these rates are higher among certain groups based on age, race and ethnicity, income, and insurance coverage. And we've provided those breakdowns in the written testimony that's being passed out. I'll tell you that both versions of the testimony are identical except for the bill numbers, so you don't have to necessarily read both. Nebraskans need further action like these bills to keep their healthcare costs down because these bills would make healthcare more affordable and accessible for Nebraskans. We urge your support on a cap for the price of insulin in Nebraska.
Thank you, Ms. Ahrens. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much for being here. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Slama and members of the committee. My name is Susan DeCamp, SUZANDECAMP, and I'm here today as the State Volunteer President for AARP Nebraska in support of both LB 142 and LB 779. We know the high price of prescription drugs is a burden on many Nebraska residents. Every day, our relatives, friends, and neighbors are forced to choose between filling life-saving prescriptions or paying bills and buying food or other critical essentials. An AARP report showed that in 2017, 29% of Nebraska residents stopped taking prescribed medications due to cost. No one should have to choose between buying medications or buying food for themselves or their families. Diabetes is one of the most common chronic diseases, and according to the Centers on Disease Control and Prevention, it is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. The roughly 141,491 Nebraskans, or 9.6% of the adult population, are living with diagnosed diabetes, and they need to purchase insulin to survive. Diagnosed diabetes costs an estimated $1.4 billion in Nebraska each year. The monthly expense to Nebraskans averages between $450 and $500. I believe Senator Kauth, you had asked that question earlier. According to the AARP 2022 Vital Voices survey, 84% of Nebraska residents age 45 plus think being able to pay for prescriptions is either extremely important or very important. In Nebraska, the average annual cost of a prescription drug treatment increased 26.3% between 2015 and 2019, while the annual income for Nebraska residents increased by only 10.4%. Over the last 14 years, the cost of their out-of-pocket cost of many insulin brands has jumped to as much as 555%. In 2017, the annual cost of Lantus, a form of insulin used to treat diabetes, was more than $4,700 per year, which was an increase of 62% from 2012. Due to these increased prices, many insulin users have been forced to alter their medication by substituting lower quality products, seeking other options outside of the country, or even having to ration their supply, as Dr. Spry and others before me have testified to, and some even dying by doing this. Insulin is not new. It was discovered as a treatment for diabetes almost 100 years ago. Very little about the way insulin is produced has changed, yet the prices continue to skyrocket. Approximately 90% of insulin sold is manufactured by only 3 companies, which limits competition and therefore results in higher costs to patients. Americans pay 3 times what people in other countries pay for the same medicine. LB 142 and LB 779 set out-of-pocket limits of $100 and $35 respectively for a 30-day supply of insulin. Just a little bit more.
Just real quick.
These bills will make the essential drug more affordable and accessible. Medications don't work if people can't afford them. As of October 2022, 24 states have enacted this legislation that limits consumers' prescription drug out-of-pocket costs. Let's make Nebraska number 25. We'd like to thank Senators Briese and Bostar for introducing the legislation, and thank you for allowing me to speak. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. DeCamp. Are there any questions from the committee? See none, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Senator Slama, Chairperson, Chairwoman.
Chairperson, Chairman, I
Senator
don't care.
My name is Andy Hale, ANDYHALE, and I'm Vice President of Advocacy for the Hospital Association. And those CTSO kids are very impressive. I would hope maybe there's a bill this session that would provide some funding. We could get them into our workforce, but that's for another hearing. So, according to the CDC, more than 30 million people in the United States have diabetes. That is nearly 1 in 10 Americans. Another 84 million are pre-diabetic and could require insulin in life. By 2030, 79 million adults worldwide with type 2 diabetes are expected to need insulin. Prices for insulin have skyrocketed, nearly tripling over the past 10 years. Type 1 diabetes patients paid an average of $5,700 for insulin. That's type 1. Because of the prices people will pay, they usually ration their medication. And some, unfortunately, even have to go without. As many as 1 in 4 people who take insulin currently skip doses because they cannot afford the medication. This bill is a good bill. We are in the business of preventative care. I think we've seen just the numbers we've heard in the statistics before show how big of a problem this is. And we are in support of both of these bills. We want to thank Senator Bostar and Senator Briese for bringing those, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hale. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Dungan.
Thank you, Chair Slama, and thank you for being here, Mr. Hale. Briefly, and I'll admit I missed part of the openings, so this may have been addressed, and I apologize if it was. But just to not beat around the bush, we're talking about these prices increasing exponentially year after year, and they're skyrocketing. Everyone's saying that. And we heard a little bit from Dr. Spry regarding sort of the modifications in peptides that have led then to additional patents being made, which can lead to higher costs. This cost that's increasing, is it going towards profits primarily? And if so, who's benefiting from it in your experience? I'm just trying to figure out where all this extra money is going.
I won't say in my experience, but my guess that those profits are going into the pockets of the pharmaceutical companies.
Okay, so that's ultimately where this price excess is probably ending up. It's not necessarily distributors, it's the actual companies.
The research that I've seen, yes, it's the actual pharmaceutical companies themselves. And I'm not sure if they're here against this bill or not, but maybe they could answer that better. But the research that we've seen, those are probably the individuals you're referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Additional questions? See none. Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Senator.
All right. Additional proponent testimony. Last call. Seeing none, we'll now open it up for opponent testimony to LB 142 and or LB 779. Seeing none, we'll now take neutral testimony. Three for three.
3 for 3, but I'm done after this.
Sweet.
Good morning again. My name is Jeremiah Blakey, spelled Jeremiah, B as in boy, Lake. I'm the Government Affairs Associate and Registered Lobbyist for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska, and I am testifying in a neutral capacity on LB 142 and LB 779. Again, specifically to the amendment that Senator Bostar referred to, which I don't know if I've seen, but that's what we're referring to. So in January of 2022, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nebraska announced that members with diabetes who are covered under a fully insured employer group health plan would have access to insulin at no cost to them. The $0 cost share insulin benefit complements our other diabetes management programs and diabetes reversal programs we offer. I want to thank Senator Bostar for working with us on this amendment to ensure that we can continue to offer no-cost insulin to Nebraskans. I want to take a minute because there's been a lot of talk about insulin and the cost of insulin. So a report from the U.S. Senate found that 3 companies control 99% of the insulin marketplace and have worked to limit competition and increase prices. Our specific experience at Blue Cross and Blue Shield is that the wholesale price of insulin, of our preferred insulin, increased 104% from the period of 2013 to 2018. For reference, the consumer price index during that same period was 9%. Despite that, we still moved forward with the plan to offer no-cost insulin to our members. And in the future, I hope we can work with this committee to actually address the true issue here, and that's the growing and unsustainable rising cost of prescription drugs by pharma. With regards to kind of the patent games that Dr. Spry referenced earlier, I got a notice last week that the Senate Judiciary Committee is actually looking at legislation on that issue. I haven't heard update as to whether or not that advanced or where that's at, but I know that's a discussion that's happening at the federal level. So with that, I'll be done and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Senator Jacobson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Salaman. Mr. Blakey, I appreciate your last comment here because I do share your concerns that people have this misconception that insurance companies are somehow this big pot of gold and we just got to keep moving out. And the fact of the matter is that you've got premium payers and you have a very difficult job to manage how this all gets done. And then you've got the providers out there that are trying to do what they can to be providers. And you've got those who manufacture these products that we all need. And so it's really that balancing act. You indicated working with us in terms of what we might be able to do to hold down the cost of prescription drugs. Do you have anything specific that we should be looking at the legislative level, at the state level, that might be helpful in achieving that? Because I think we're all interested in figuring out how we can drive those costs down.
Yeah, we share that goal. Let me get back to you on that. Okay, Senator?
Great. Appreciate that.
Given where we're at in the session, I don't think it's probably the right time to have that discussion right now, but I think over
realize
this summer, we would love to work with you on that.
I think we'd be very interested in figuring out what we can do. And if there's things we can do at the state level, I'd really like to hear that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Any additional questions? See none. Thank you, Mr. Blakey.
Thank you.
Good morning, because it's still morning.
It is still morning, sorry. Good morning, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Robert N. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I am the Executive Director and Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation, the State Trade Association of Nebraska Insurance Companies. I appear today in a neutral capacity on LB 145 and LB 779, and I would first like to appreciate my appreciation to the senators for their interest in this subject. Senator Bostar has an amendment that would make this language palatable for insurers by providing the cost sharing limitation is limited to the insurer's lowest tier. Such an amendment reflects current practice of most insurers and removes the opposition of our industry from the bill. Also, the amendment captures kind of the spirit of the federal rules related to Medicare patients. Cost sharing caps as presented by both bills are attractive policies for those who have diabetes. I'm going to hark on this a little bit, that it does not address the root problem of the issue, which is the high cost of insulin. 3 manufacturers of insulin. I understand the state of California is getting into the manufacture of insulin to provide low cost insulin. not necessarily recommending that for the state of Nebraska. California does many things that I wouldn't recommend for the state of Nebraska. But I mean, everybody is looking for an answer. And to kind of address what Senator Jacobson asked Mr. Blakey, I did have a bill drafted up, and I'm sorry to the bill drafters if they're watching because it was not introduced, but that would make a pharmaceutical company notify the state of Nebraska if its price went up over a certain limit, and to provide justification to the state if that happened. The problem with that is we started to dig into it. It has no teeth, right? There's nothing. You tell the state, and a few states have passed laws like that, but we haven't seen an actual reduction in the pharmaceutical cost of this. So, you know, obviously insurers see the benefit of providing low cost share to their insureds that have diabetes so they can get this insulin that they need. And all of us just pay higher premiums because of it. And that's just kind of the root cause. I think I've now harped on 3 bills in a row that, you know, at the end, if we're paying more for claims, premium has to go up to stay solvent, right? So that's kind of the main thing. One other, I just want to point out, just want you senators to know that this would not apply to our ERISA plans. So we're talking about large multi or employer sponsor plans. ERISA is, of course, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. I just point that out in case, as this law passes, if there's an employee plan out there that doesn't follow that, they don't have to, and you'll get a phone call. And there's honestly not a lot the state of Nebraska can do about that. It's a federal issue. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bell. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Additional neutral testimony on LB 142 or LB 779. Seeing none, Senator Briese, you're welcome to close. And as you approach, we have 9 proponent letters for the record on LB 142 and 11 proponent letters for the record on LB 779.
Thank you, Chairwoman Slama and members of the committee for your indulgence today. Appreciate it. And Senator Jacobson, like you, I am concerned about healthcare costs in general, prescription drug prices particularly. I did introduce LB 200 to require the state to set up a Canadian drug importation program in an effort to hopefully make a little progress in that front. And pharmaceutical companies weren't all excited about that bill, but there are definitely profits to be protected in that industry. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here. The committee has some work to do on this and considerations to keep in mind. And the amendment, I have to ask yourselves, has that got the impact of this legislation? We heard quite a bit of data on the number of Nebraskans that this would impact. Some suggest 10% of Nebraskans. I don't recall what Senator Bostar's numbers were, but point is there's a wide swath of Nebraskans that this can have a very beneficial impact for. So I would ask for your consideration of LB 142 and Senator Bostar's bill as well, and see if we can find a landing spot somewhere in there on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Briese. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. All right, Senator Bostar, you're welcome to close on LB 779.
I'll be brief since we're essentially out of time. Thank you, Chair Slama and members of the committee, and thank you to Senator Briese. You know, I'll be honest, bringing a bill similar to Senator Briese feels good because, you know, it's serious stuff. And thank you to all the testifiers who came and patiently waited through a couple other hearings in order to make it to this point. With that, I'll answer any questions the committee may have. Otherwise, thank you again.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions from the committee?
A very quick one. I'm watching the clock up here. I know that look. Very briefly, Senator Briese spoke of the amendment, and I'm assuming that was a key part of getting the insurance companies into a neutral position.
That's correct.
Okay, and that would be material, likely if that, and I should have asked them this, but I'm making the assumption that they would be in opposition if that amendment was not part of this bill.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Any additional questions? And with that, it is 11:59 and we are done with our hearings for this morning. Thank you all so much for being here.